Hi, you're listening to the Business News Wales Business Insight podcast from myself, Jodie Bryant. Joining me today is CEO of Rescape Innovation, Matt Wordley. Hello, Matt.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. So just before we get into our 15-minute Q&A, I wanted to ask you 3 personal quickfire questions. Is that all right?
Absolutely, go for it.
Brilliant. So number 1, what's your favourite quote?
Ooh, okay. Yeah, interesting one. I'm one of these people who doesn't stick to one quote. I like different quotes at different times, depending on what's going on in the world. So I think I watched The Social Dilemma the other day on Netflix, which was worth watching if you haven't watched it. I think the one that came out of that, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. Very interesting times we're in and what's going on there.
Yeah, I took that away actually as well. Yeah, no, brilliant, very current, isn't it? And as a result, I don't actually use social media in the week after watching that. So yeah, very good one.
Yeah, I think for us, very interesting because obviously with what we're doing as a business, you know, looking into the future, there's data collection opportunities, and I'm very keen. And there was a big corporation who did have to say this, to do no evil on the way through.
No, brilliant. Absolutely agree. So number 2 then, what's some advice you would give to your younger self?
Okay, that's an interesting one. Probably not take life too seriously. You're only here once. Make sure you do try and enjoy the moment, and don't, which probably particularly at the moment is very current, don't get too stressed about things that aren't in your sphere of control.
And number 3, name one tech rule you implement personally or in your household.
Okay, so I have a 12-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son. There are no mobile phones in the bedroom, and yeah, that was absolute no, and that applies to myself and my wife as well.
Brilliant. So let's talk business. The first question I wanted to ask you was, when did you get the idea for Rescape, and how did you put your idea into practice?
Okay, so I suppose to give it a little bit of history, I was one of the founders of the Orchard Media and Events Group, which is obviously probably the largest full-service agency based in Wales, also does TV production as well as live music promoting. We got very heavily into virtual reality in about 2015. When the technology was taking some big leaps and bounds, and we were using it for our clients for exhibition stands and for training and all those things that virtual reality is great for. Along the way, I sat actually in a TEDx talk with a gentleman called Mark Tobert, who is the head of palliative care at Velindre Cancer Hospital. We were actually at that TEDx talk as the agency, demonstrating VR, and I think we were showing some stuff we'd filmed in London Zoo the week before. Mark did an amazing talk all about the challenges of communicating during palliative care. And I listened to that, and I was like, I didn't know Mark. I grabbed him afterwards, and I said, you know, we're utilizing this really interesting new technology called virtual reality. It is very an interesting communications tool because the uptake of information is really high, the retention of information is really high, and it really is something different. And I said, I'm sure there are some opportunities for us to help you with some of those communication challenges, utilizing virtual reality. I think I sat in amongst some meerkats and some penguins at that event that we were demonstrating. He was quite blown away by that. But in effect, at the agency, then we went and did some pro bono work for him and his clinical team to identify a challenge that they had to see whether we could utilize virtual reality to get through it. And what we came up with was to help people get through MRI scans. And they very often have a situation where people turn up for an MRI scan or turn up and their anxiety sometimes is so level they don't even go through the MRI scan, and that's obviously not good for them and not good for a missed MRI slot. So what we did was we in effect recorded the whole journey for a patient in VR, from the moment they turned up to the car park, to the receptionist, to meeting the orderly, to getting through to the technician, going through an MRI suite in virtual reality. And we filmed this in high quality VR, and we gave Mark and his team a load of headsets and said, crack on, we're really interested to see how much that helps you in communicating that although an MRI scan is not a pleasant experience, is not something to be petrified about. So they were able to go when they had somebody come in for an early appointment and say, look, you've got to come in for an MRI scan next week. It's nothing to be worried about. Put this headset on. In 90 seconds, you'll have been through the experience. We all know that once you've done something once, the second time is less anxiety inducing. So what was really interesting though was when we had the feedback from that, anecdotally they saw a reduction in the number of no-shows for MRIs, which is obviously great, but they said it was very noticeable that you could actually see when you put people into VR a level of relaxation. You could see their shoulders drop, you could see their breathing regulate, and we were like, well, that's really interesting. We're obviously having some psychological effect on people by putting them in VR. And then actually when we went and did some sort of quite deep research, there's studies going back to the late 90s showing that you can not only reduce anxiety, but you can also reduce pain utilizing VR. So we were like, well, that's if you can reduce pain using VR, and and it's non-intrusive, non-addictive, reusable, non-drug related, no side effects solution, or very minimal side effect solution, why are we not seeing it being used within the NHS and within the care? And there were a load of deployment issues and infection control and Wi-Fi and a whole load of things. So basically we were like, well, we can overcome those challenges, which we did. We created a minimal viable product. And somebody offered to buy one. We thought, well, that's interesting. So we created a new company and further developed the product. And that's where Rescape was born.
Oh, fantastic. That sounds absolutely amazing. It's such a good thing to be able to reduce anxiety. And I think there's that thing, isn't there, where the idea of something can be a lot scarier of the reality of it. So by putting that VR headset on, you're actually showing people calming their nerves, nothing to be worried about, and helping through that process. So brilliant. I know that you mentioned there were some challenges around Wi-Fi, when initially bringing out and rolling out solutions. What have been your main challenges through building Rescape, and how have you overcome those challenges?
So I think it's an interesting journey we've been on. So when we raised our first funding back in February 2019. We further developed the product, got it sort of market ready, and it was like brilliant. Got our Doctor VR in a box solution, and we went going to banging on doors. Going, why wouldn't they buy it? It's amazing. You can see the instant impact. Selling into the NHS it's difficult. It's renowned to be difficult, and there's a lot of companies who do what we do who don't sell products for many years. We are very early at the adoption curve of this technology, so we're right at the start. Hopefully the R number is increasing, but at the moment we've only really been able to sell into very early adopters and those innovators more than anything. So I think for us, the challenge was realizing that to sell particularly into healthcare, that things obviously have to be done with rigor, evidence-backed, through clinical pathways, understanding how it's going to affect a patient's pathways. So the biggest challenge for us as a business was starting to go, well, what do we need to prove on the way to show that this is a real viable alternative to opioids, other drugs, and also to be able to demonstrate the amazing patient impact that it could make along the way. So that's probably been the sort of the biggest challenge for us. And none of our team had come out of a health environment, so we've learned an awful lot in the last 18 months. And in some ways, maybe that's been advantageous, because we've gone, right, let's get cut away through. And actually that has benefited us because we have successfully sold product.
Brilliant. Yeah, I suppose it's coming from a completely different angle, isn't it? And trying to merge both worlds together, being the traditional healthcare world, and then merging it into technology. So
absolutely.
Brilliant. So VR has actually been around for some time, hasn't it? However, like you say, and like you've mentioned, it is still very much an emerging technology. Tell me a bit about the role it plays currently within healthcare and where you see its potential.
Okay, so yeah, absolutely. We are still at the Commodore 64 ZX Spectrum BBC Micro. I always can tell people's ages then whether they remember any of that or not. I'm not. So you know, we're at that stage of the technology. I think what is going to come over the next 7 years is going to be phenomenal in how that technology takes massive steps forward. And in fact, what we're building, we're making sure we're very technologically agnostic in our approach. You know, we genuinely see a situation in the future where every patient in primary and secondary care will have access to a VR headset for therapeutic and well-being care in that. And I think we're only just scratching the surface of what impact you know, can be made into each individual sort of vertical care pathway and into individual patients. We're also doing some really interesting work at the moment. We've been helping we've been working with Serco, help train prison custodial guards in empathy. That's been very, very interesting as well. And, you know, obviously anything that helps de-escalate a situation, you know, is good for the person sitting both sides, the prison custodial and the person in their care as well. That's really interesting. So again, we're finding how that's coming together. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing that is fascinating is the ability from a well-being perspective is, you know, the impact on positive mental health it can have. So we did a study last year working with Dr. Kerry Leith at Royal Glamorgan, Taffnell Gallagher University Health Board, and Gemma Jones there, where they did a study utilising our system in ICU. And within that, they showed that they could effectively reduce pain and anxiety on patients, their relatives, but also staff. So we've actually been working alongside the Centre for Trials Research at Cardiff University and also CumTaft, where we did a feasibility study earlier this year, where we showed that we could reduce anxiety in frontline NHS staff, which obviously has been heightened during COVID. However, was a significant issue pre-COVID anyway. To give you a stat, there were over 430,000 days lost due to stress, depression, and anxiety in the NHS, which is an enormous, and that was in January alone, just in 1 month. So that's really interesting. So we're currently working that towards a phase 3 clinical trial to do that across 11 health boards across the UK to utilise our platform to reduce anxiety within healthcare workers. So yeah, so we also think that everyone within a blue light or within a work environment in the future will have access to a VR headset.
Fantastic. So what technologies do you think that we should be adopting both in Wales and also globally to improve patient care and ultimately the quality of life for people and their families?
Okay, so going back to my earlier point about the quote, I think, you know, some of the stuff that is coming down the line in the ability to collect biometric data and data in general, and, you know, and to use med tech, which becomes diagnostic, is really, really interesting and fascinating. And I think they're, you know, used in the right way, there are huge opportunities to leverage some of the sort of machine learning, biometrics. You know, 5G is really interesting, what's coming down the line. You know, one of the things we have absolutely on our radar and our moonshot that we want to do, and we're looking at a couple of sort of potential large R&D projects, is we think VR, for example, has an ability to really impact loneliness into people in the future, done in the right way. And that's really, really interesting. And I think, you know, kind of, it's actually shown with what's happened in the last 6 months with lockdown and people being more isolated. For those people who don't easily have the ability to go into another environment or to go and visit somebody or things like that, you know, some of this technology could potentially be life-changing in what it can do. And, you know, just the impact that we see sometimes with people who've been stuck somewhere and then we give them an amazing tour within VR and they go somewhere, the fundamental change immediately in that person is just phenomenal. So yeah, I think very exciting.
Brilliant. So kind of healthcare aside then, where do you see the adoption of new technologies making the most positive impact on society? Are there any other verticals you feel like technology could really be of benefit?
Well, obviously our largest threat is environmental change, and without a shadow of a doubt, technology has to play a large part in solving that problem. And in the same way that we have seen enormous investments going into quickly looking for solutions for the current pandemic we're in, without a shadow of a doubt, if we look at the massive, call it a pandemic or whatever, the massive threat that humanity has of climate change, technology and investment and looking at how we overcome that problem as quickly as possible can only be good for everyone. So, the green agenda must be absolutely top of everything that we, even with what we do at the moment. I mean, it's interesting you look at VR and go, well, what's the opportunity for, and we're talking a little way in the head, but what's the ability for somebody to almost have a virtual holiday rather than getting on a plane and flying somewhere and some of the environments and meeting people. And, we've seen the incredible adoption of video conferencing as we're sitting here today, which has, if you look at the miles and the impact that's had from an environmental perspective has potentially been huge. I still think people need to get together in a room and going forward. I just hope that comes back, because video conferencing is great, but it's not the same as meeting people.
Yeah, I agree. So, yeah, but it could be that the new normal is a blended approach, isn't it? And it uses that face-to-face, but also, like you say, taking into consideration some of the environmental challenges. Maybe it's, you meet face-to-face 1 in every 3 meetings as opposed to every meeting. Finding a balance.
Absolutely. And I believe that in the future we will get to a stage where virtual reality will be as good as meeting face to face in the way that you can see somebody and understand their body language and everything else. The challenge, as always, it'll be hacked, so people will end up with it putting across an avatar that probably isn't them. So
yeah. It comes with its challenges, doesn't it? Absolutely. But I know, I mean, there's some amazing things that are happening at the minute. We've already got kind of holographic calls that are, we have the technology that can enable that already. So it's just bringing it out into the mainstream, isn't it? And having the infrastructure, I think, to be able to handle it globally. So no, definitely. One last question, if that's all right, Matt, before we end the call. So you have mentioned a few technologies already, actually, with regards to how we can transform the way we live. But how do you see technology transforming the way we live over the next 5 years?
It's an interesting question. I think, without a shadow of doubt, green cars, the opportunity to, I hope that the consumer becomes environmentally aware in the way that they adopt technology going forward and look for positive impacts around, in the way that they consume. I think I said technology, and I said the video, the social dilemma I mentioned on Netflix earlier. I mean, it's a very fine balance we're treading to make sure that these amazing tools, and particularly artificial intelligence and machine learning and these type of things, are used for positivity and good. And again, I think as consumers, we have to try and ensure that we engage with the ones that are good and not get too sucked into the stuff that is in effect addictive. But kind of as I said, we have our moonshot of solving loneliness. If we can do it, and we do it in a right way that is positive and good for people's health and well-being, then brilliant. I think the generation, and as I said, I mentioned I've got two children, seeing how their relationship with technology is at times slightly concerning. They're almost in acceptance that they are the product, you know, yeah. So I hope it's all for good. There are parts of me that looks and goes, we just need to get it right. So from us as Rescape, you know, we're super excited from the fact that we are, you know, we are a tech for good company. We have an absolute pure mission to make sure that everything that we do, you know, is positive from a patient and part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Brilliant. Matt, thank you so much for your time. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Keep up all the, you know, the good work and the exciting stuff that you've got going on in Rescape that is really going to transform healthcare and, you know, the patient experience and the way we live and the way that we kind of prescribe different things for pain and anxiety and things. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. And thank you to all those who are listening as well. I hope everyone's conversation as interesting as I have. Matt, if there's any people or businesses out there that are keen to find out more of the great work that you're doing, or if they want to work with you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Okay, so we have sort of 2 points you come through to us. So obviously our main Rescape is www.rescape.me. Our email coming into us is info@rescape.me. We also have www.futurevision.health. So that's futurevision.health, which is our collaboration portal. Because, you know, we have aspirations to be a global company doing what we're doing, and that will only come through effective working relationships with our, you know, with the NHS and with the academia and everything else. So we're absolutely driven to having, you know, symbiotic relationships with partners on what we're doing. So, you know, we're very interested in talking to people who can, you know, help us achieve our moonshots and the, you know, the tech for good that we want to do. You know, we're working through to a Series A is our intention within 18 months. And yeah, and it's great that we're building that momentum alongside some of the partners we're working with.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Matt. Have a great morning, and I'll catch up with you soon. Thanks so much for your time.